I had a friend in college. We were close in a way that felt effortless. The kind of friendship where you don't have to explain yourself, where silence is comfortable, where you just click. We'd stay up late talking about nothing and everything. We shared the same outlook and humour. And even when we disagreed on things, it was soon forgotten with a silly joke or observation. There was this unspoken belief that this friendship was permanent. Then life happened. We drifted apart. Not dramatically, no falling out, no betrayal, nothing you could point to as a reason. We simply graduated, moved to different cities, started different jobs, lived different lives. At first we stayed in touch, but over time the messages got less frequent. The calls felt more obligatory. When we did talk, there was this strange distance, not hostility, just the uncomfortable realization that we didn't really have much in common anymore. And then one day, maybe a year or two later, I ran into him. We had that awkward conversation where you're both trying to act like nothing's changed, but you know something has. The ease was gone. The connection that once felt so natural now required effort. And when we said goodbye, there was this unspoken acknowledgement that we probably wouldn't see each other again for a while, or ever. The sadness that followed wasn't dramatic either, just this quiet regret. What happened? Did someone fail here? Should I have tried harder? Was I not a good enough friend? Or maybe it was never as real as I thought it was. All these explanations felt terrible and incomplete. Something that once mattered so much just drifted away. And the loss of it felt like proof that something went wrong. But that feeling is built on an assumption we rarely examine. When something is good, a friendship, a possession, a circumstance, we expect it to stay that way. Good things, we believe, should be permanent. Close friendships should remain close. Success should continue. Health should hold. The things we value should be unchanging, or at least we should be able to keep them unchanged through enough effort and care. When you get something new that you care about, a phone, a car, whatever matters to you, the first scratch feels disproportionately devastating. Not because of the damage itself, but because it crosses a threshold. The thing was perfect, and now it's not. Now you're in maintenance mode, vigilant against every potential scrape or dent. What was supposed to bring you joy becomes a source of low-grade anxiety. We do this with everything. Our careers should follow an upward trajectory. Our homes should stay pristine. Our relationships should remain stable. Our bodies should stay healthy and strong. When any of these things change, when the career stalls, when the house needs repairs, when relationships transform, when the body ages, we experience it as loss, as failure, as something that shouldn't be happening. And this makes a certain kind of sense. Why wouldn't we want good things to last? But there's something underneath this that might be worth examining. The assumption that permanence equals value, and impermanence equals loss. Our cultural default is to treat impermanence as a problem. But what if there was a different way of relating to it? Not just intellectually accepting things change, but actually having a different relationship with imperfection and impermanence. There's a philosophy that emerged in medieval Japan that approaches this completely differently. It's called Wabi-Sabi, a philosophy that grew out of Zen Buddhism, which had been brought to Japan from China. Chinese aesthetics at the time valued perfection, symmetry, polish, the idea that art should aspire to an ideal form. Japanese practitioners started moving in the opposite direction. They began finding beauty, not in spite of imperfection and impermanence, but because of it. Wabi originally meant something like the loneliness or melancholy of living in nature, separated from society. Over time, it evolved to mean rustic simplicity, quietness, understated elegance. Sabi relates to the beauty that comes with age, the patina that time leaves on things, the quality of weathering and wear. Wabi-Sabi, then, is finding beauty, meaning and peace in things that are imperfect, impermanent and incomplete. A key figure in formalizing these ideas was Senno Rikyu, a 16th century tea master. The tea ceremony in Japan became this practical ground for wabi-sabi principles. Rikyu would deliberately choose tea bowls that were asymmetrical, slightly rough, visibly handmade rather than perfectly uniform. He'd arrange flowers in a way that looked natural and imperfect rather than formal and controlled. The entire ceremony was designed to acknowledge something. This particular gathering with these specific people in this moment, it will never happen exactly this way again. Each gathering was unrepeatable. There's a practice that captures this called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer mixed with gold or silver. When a tea bowl breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the damage, you repair it in a way that makes the breaks visible, even beautiful. The golden seams become the most distinctive feature of the bowl. The object becomes more valuable, more interesting, more itself because of having been broken and repaired. What's interesting about kintsugi is what it implies about value itself. In most cultures, a broken bowl is worthless. Its brokenness is a flaw that diminishes it. But kintsugi suggests the opposite. The bowl's history, including its breaking and repair, is what makes it valuable. The golden seams don't hide the damage, but honor it. They say, this object had a life, it was used, it broke, it was cared for enough to repair. That entire story is visible in the object itself. The breaks aren't mistakes to conceal, but part of the object's past. They're the signature of something real that existed in the world. At the foundation of Wabi-Sabi is the Buddhist concept called Mujo, impermanence. Nothing lasts, nothing is finished, nothing is permanent. This isn't a depressing observation, but reality. Everything is always in the process of changing. Possessions wear, relationships transform, bodies age, circumstances shift. Zen Buddhism talks about 3 marks of existence. Anicca, which is impermanence, all things arise and pass away. Dukkha, usually translated as suffering, but may be better understood as dissatisfaction that comes from clinging to what changes. And anatta, non-self, the idea that even you are not a fixed, unchanging thing. Wabi-Sabi makes us consider the following. If these are the actual conditions of existence, impermanence, dissatisfaction from clinging, the absence of a fixed self, then why are we organizing our lives around denying them? We're building our sense of meaning and value on permanence, on keeping things unchanged, on maintaining a consistent identity. But if the foundation itself is unstable, then everything built upon it will create suffering, not because the things themselves are bad, but because we're relating to them in a way that fights against nature. Western philosophy tends to treat these as problems to be solved or overcome. Wabi-Sabi takes them as a starting point and asks, if this is reality, then what? If permanence is impossible, then perfection is impossible, because perfection would imply something complete and unchanging. And if that's true, then the marks of time, the signs of change, the evidence of imperfection, these aren't deviations from how things should be. They're the only way things can be. Wabi-Sabi says impermanence is just how things are, and maybe we should relate to that differently. But what we actually want, what our entire culture seems organised around, is the exact opposite. We want our careers to stay successful, to follow an upward trajectory without setbacks. We want our relationships to remain unchanged, or at least to change only in positive ways. We want our homes to stay pristine, our possessions to remain in perfect condition. We want our financial situations to be stable, predictably secure. We want our bodies to stay healthy, strong, ideally looking the same as they did when we felt our best. And who wouldn't want that? The desire for stability makes complete sense, but here's the problem. It's not realistic, not even slightly. This isn't pessimism, it's just observation. Everything changes. Not because something went wrong, not because you failed to prevent it, but because change is the nature of existence itself. The first car you buy will get old. The pristine apartment will accumulate wear. The successful project will eventually end or evolve into something else. The close friendship will shift as lives diverge. The body that feels invincible will show its limits. These aren't individual failures. This is the pattern. And here's what's interesting. We know this intellectually. If you ask someone, do things stay the same forever? They'd say no, of course not. But knowing it intellectually doesn't change how we actually relate to it emotionally. We still experience change as loss. We still feel that first scratch as a small tragedy. We still interpret the drifting friendship as something that went wrong. We understand that impermanence is real, but we live life as if it shouldn't apply to the things that we care about. We make an exception for what matters to us. Those things should be different. Those things we should be able to preserve. But what are we actually afraid of? On the surface, we say we're afraid of losing the thing itself, the friendship, the youth, the success. But underneath that is something deeper. If good things don't last, if even our best efforts can't preserve what matters, then we're not in control. And if we're not in control, then we're vulnerable. The permanence we're chasing isn't really about the things themselves. It's about the illusion of security. This is why change feels so threatening, even when we know it's inevitable. Every time something good changes or ends, it reminds us that we can't actually control outcomes. We can work hard, care deeply, try our best, and things still slip away. That's terrifying. So we tell ourselves the problem is that we didn't try hard enough, didn't care enough, didn't do it right. Because that explanation, painful as it is more tolerable than the alternative. That impermanence is built into existence itself, and no amount of effort can change that. Think about that friendship that drifted. The sadness wasn't just about missing the person. It was about the feeling that something that was supposed to be permanent wasn't. The regret came from believing that if the friendship was real enough, meaningful enough, if we'd been good enough friends, it should have lasted. The change felt like evidence of failure. But what if the change wasn't the problem? What if the expectation of permanence was? When you expect your possessions to stay perfect, every mark becomes a loss. When you expect your career to follow a specific trajectory, every deviation feels like failure. When you expect relationships to remain unchanged, every transformation feels like something ending. When you expect your body to maintain its current state, aging feels like betrayal. The anxiety this creates is exhausting. Every attempt to freeze your circumstances in their current state is a battle you can't win. And while you're fighting to preserve things, you can't fully experience them. When you're anxiously protecting your new phone from scratches, you're not enjoying having the phone. When you're trying to keep a friendship frozen in time, you're not present with who your friend is becoming. When you're fighting against your body's changes, you're at war with the only body you have. The attempt to hold on to things actually prevents you from experiencing them fully. So what does Wabi-Sabi offer? It's not a technique for accepting loss or a way to feel better about things falling apart. It's something more fundamental, a different way of relating to the fact that everything changes. The shift happens in how you hold things while you have them. Instead of vigilance, that constant monitoring, protecting, preventing, Wabi-Sabi suggests presence. If things are going to change regardless, then the question isn't how do I prevent this, but how do I be with this while it's here? When you stop trying to freeze things in place, something interesting happens. You can actually experience them. That possession you were protecting from its first scratch, you can begin to use it, let it accumulate the marks of being part of your life. It becomes yours in a way a pristine object never could be. The wear patterns tell a story, not of decline but of use, of presence, of something that was actually lived with. Think about a well-used book, pages dog-eared and spine cracked, versus one kept pristine on a shelf. The pristine one might look better, but the worn one has been read. It served its purpose. The marks are evidence that someone engaged with it deeply. That friendship that's changing, instead of trying to force it back to what it was, you can be present with what it is now. Maybe you see each other less, maybe the conversations are different, but you're not carrying the anxiety of, we're supposed to be closer than this. You can appreciate what's actually there instead of measuring it against an imagined ideal. The Wabi-Sabi approach? You might simply enjoy the conversation you're actually having, without the shadow of the friendship you used to have hanging over it. You're not trying to resurrect what was, you're present with what is. And maybe that's a brief catch-up that feels warm enough, even if it's not deep. Maybe that's enough. Your body that's aging, instead of fighting every change, you can inhabit it as it is. The extra weight, the reduced energy, the way things that used to be easy now require more effort. These aren't signs that your body is betraying you. This is just what bodies do. They change, they bear the marks of time, and those marks are evidence of a life being lived. There's a difference between taking care of your body and being at war with it. Taking care of it means nourishing it, moving it, resting it based on what it needs now, not what it needed 10 years ago. Being at war with it means every change is an enemy to fight, every sign of aging is a battle lost. One approach creates sustainable health, the other creates shame and exhaustion. The principle under all of this is the same. When you stop measuring everything against an ideal of permanence and perfection, you can appreciate what actually exists. But here's what makes this difficult. Our entire culture is organized around the opposite. We're taught that value comes from newness, from perfection, from things staying unchanged. The advertising we see, the social media we scroll, the stories we're told, they all reinforce this. So adopting a Wabi-Sabi mindset is swimming against the current that's constantly pushing in the other direction. Wabi-Sabi isn't promising you'll be thrilled about things changing. Instead, it offers contentment that doesn't depend on circumstances staying the same, and a gratitude for what's here while it's here, without the burden of it needing to last forever. And you can be grateful for things without the shadow of, but what if this ends, hanging over them. You can appreciate what something is without needing it to continue being that. You can be grateful that you were able to experience something meaningful, even if it was temporary. The meaning doesn't come from permanence. It comes from the specific, unrepeatable nature of each moment. Impermanence isn't the problem we thought it was. Our expectation of permanence is. So that friendship that drifted, the one from the beginning, what does it look like through a Wabi-Sabi lens? It didn't fail. The drift wasn't evidence that someone didn't try hard enough, or that the friendship wasn't real. It was just what happens when two people who connected deeply in one context find themselves in different contexts, becoming different versions of themselves. The friendship existed in a particular place at a particular time, a particular set of shared circumstances. We were both who we were then, with those struggles, those interests, those ways of seeing the world. The connection was real, precisely because of those specificities. It wasn't generic closeness, it was the specific closeness of two people in that moment. But people aren't static. The version of me that existed in that friendship kept changing, so did they. Trying to preserve that friendship exactly as it was would have required both of us to stop growing, stop changing, stay frozen as the people we were then. That's not realistic. More than that, it's not even desirable. No doubt you can relate to a drifting friendship. What you can carry forward isn't the friendship in its original form. That existed in a time and place that no longer exists. What you can carry is what that friendship gave you, the ways it shaped who you became, what you learned about yourself through it, how it influenced the path you took. That's not the past in some distant sense. That's actively part of your present self. And if that's true about friendship, then it's true about everything else. Your parents are aging. That relationship will change and eventually end. You can spend that time anxiously trying to preserve how things are, visiting more often out of guilt, trying to keep them from changing, treating every shift as a loss to manage. Or you can be present with them as they are now, knowing this phase won't last. That might mean accepting that your father isn't as sharp as he once was, without treating that as a tragedy. It might mean appreciating your mother's stories even when she's told them before. It's not about denying that things are changing. It's about being with what's actually here, instead of mourning what's actually already gone or dreading what's coming. Your body is changing. It will continue to change until it stops working entirely. You can fight that reality every step of the way, spend your energy trying to look the same, treating every physical change as something that shouldn't be happening, resenting the body you have because it's not the body you had. Or you can inhabit the body you have now. That doesn't mean neglecting your health. It means acknowledging that this body, with its current capabilities and limitations, is the only one that's actually here. The body you had at 20 isn't coming back, but the body you have now is still carrying you through life. That's not something to resent. Your career will evolve, probably in ways you didn't plan. Projects will end, positions will change. Skills that once defined you might become obsolete. The path you're actually on is almost certainly different from the one you imagined at 25. And you can experience each shift as failure, as evidence that you should have planned better, worked harder, made different choices. Or you can recognize that the path that actually happens is more real than the perfect trajectory you imagined. The detours taught you things the straight path never would have. Even your sense of who you are will change. The interests that define you now might fade. The values you hold might evolve. The person you're becoming isn't the finished version of who you are now. You'll keep changing until you don't. I once came across a long list of goals I had made when I was 19, decades ago. Nothing on that list interests who I am today. The person who wrote that list is unrecognizable to me. Everything changes. Wabi-Sabi isn't promising you'll be happy about any of this. Watching your parents age isn't joyful. Losing capabilities as your body changes isn't something to celebrate. Seeing friendships fade can be painful. But here's what it does offer. A way to be with all of that doesn't create additional suffering on top of the natural sadness that comes with change. You can be sad that a relationship transformed without also carrying the guilt that you failed to prevent it. You can grieve your aging parents without the extra layer of anxiety about whether you're spending enough time with them. You can acknowledge your body's changes without being at war with the only body you have. The contentment Wabi-Sabi points towards isn't about everything going well. It's about being present with what actually is, which includes loss, change, imperfection, and the passage of time. It's peace that doesn't depend on circumstances cooperating with your preferences, and there's something freeing in that. Wabi-Sabi isn't asking you to give up on things or stop caring about what matters. It's offering a different way to relate to the fact that everything changes. When you stop fighting impermanence, something shifts. Not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually. You notice moments where you're actually present instead of anxiously protecting. You find yourself appreciating something without immediately worrying about when it will end. You feel grateful for what you have now instead of mourning what's not or won't become. This doesn't solve impermanence. Nothing does. Your friendships will transform, your body will age, your circumstances will shift. But you can relate to all of that differently. Not with resignation, but with a kind of peace that doesn't depend on things staying the same. We live in a culture that tells us to fight against every form of imperfection and decay. We're surrounded by industries built on the promise that change can be defeated, that with enough effort, enough products, enough vigilance, we can make good things stay. But that fight costs you the ability to be where you actually are. It costs you the ability to experience what you have while you have it. The question Wabi-Sabi asks isn't how to make things permanent and unchanging. It's whether you can be grateful for them while they're still here, whether you can appreciate the meal while you're eating it, the friendship while it exists, the body while it's carrying you, the moment while it's happening. That's not a small thing. That might be everything.